Hi, my name is Dr. Oli Buckley and I'm an Associate Professor in Cybersecurity at UEA. Welcome to my talk, Money for Nothing, Giving Your Data Away for Free, where we're going to talk about the importance of data, the importance of data online and in the internet, and what you can do to keep yourself safe. I'm sorry to say there isn't going to be much in the way of dire straits related content, so the title was slightly misleading. So today I want to talk to you about what data is and why it's important, why you should care about this, and why you should care about your own privacy and your own data, how companies and other people get hold of your data and what they might do with it in the end, and then how you can protect yourself and how you can be a bit more careful online and look after your own data and your own identity online. What do all of these companies have in common? We've got Google, we've got Twitter, we've got Facebook. Well, they're some of the biggest and most profitable companies in the world, and they have one thing in common. They make an absolute fortune collecting and selling data, mostly your data to be more specific. Google earns a huge amount of money from adverts, and it made nearly $150 billion in the last year from adverts alone. Google Ads work on a pay-per-click model that means marketers can target a specific keyword on Google and make bids accordingly, competing with other companies to target that word. So, for example, during the European Championships this year, football would become a very popular search on Google. So marketers might bid for their company for the word football, so that when anyone searches football, their advert ranks at the top of Google. Google uses all the things that they know about you to help companies target these adverts to meet your needs and the things they think you might want to see. This could include searches, it could include locations, the websites you've visited, the apps you've used, the videos you've watched, or any other data they might hold about you. So let's take an example. Have you ever had an advert crop up on a web page for exactly the thing that you had just been talking about? It's quite disconcerting, isn't it? It feels like your phone might be listening to you, or your devices in your house are listening to you. Maybe you were discussing a nice holiday in France, then lo and behold you start to see adverts for a beautiful holiday cottage in Brittany all over the place. Now the good news here is that your phone hasn't been listening to you. Thankfully we haven't got to the stage where things are quite that creepy and unsettling just yet. Instead, Google has been piecing together everything that it knows about you and even the people around you. Perhaps you sat with your friends discussing your French getaway and one of them's inspired to look for their own holiday in France and they Google holidays in France. Now that becomes part of the profile that Google holds about you and your friends. It knows you are sat next to someone or in close proximity to someone who's searching for holidays in France. And so it pieces that together to understand that maybe you and others in the group are interested in that subject as well. It takes that and it uses all the other data that it knows about you to build this profile so it can target you with very specific content. And we'll talk a lot more about that as we go through things today. Think about when you begin to type in a search on Google and it starts to autocomplete and suggest what you're searching for. Most of the time the answer that it predicts is very accurate, startlingly accurate in some cases. In other cases it can be quite funny, but let's leave that to one side. But how do they manage it? What witchcraft and sorcery are the Google shamans carrying out? Sadly, it's not really that exciting. There isn't any black magic going on behind the scenes. There's no wizardry. They just have a lot of data, and I mean a lot. And so Google are able to work out the probability that someone in your demographic typing the words into the search bar will probably result in searching for some of their suggestions. And when I say demographic, I mean your age, your location, the types of website you visit, what country you live in, what gender you are, all of the stuff that they know about you. And even if they aren't that accurate in suggesting results, what you do end up searching for is really useful for them because that gets thrown into the cauldron of data for next time. Everything you do on the internet goes somewhere and it all contributes to something, whether that's a personal profile on a website or a more generic profile for your particular demographic. And as we've talked about briefly, some of the largest companies in the world now are data-driven companies. They trade in data, they buy data, and they sell data. There's no escaping that data is a currency and is a very valuable commodity in today's world. It drives all the services that we use, it drives all the products that we use, and it's vastly important to the world that we live in. It facilitates the life we have now. You can find any number of people claiming that data is the new oil because it is so important and it really does make the world go round. I would go one further and suggest that data isn't the new oil and it's more like the new water. Data makes the world go round, and without it, the things we rely on would cease to exist. Imagine a life without Facebook, or personalised adverts, or special recommendations on what you should watch next on Netflix. In fact, only a few weeks ago, we had Facebook, WhatsApp and Instagram that went down. And it was a real shock for people. They couldn't connect with their friends, they couldn't view content, they couldn't talk about things, and it was a real panic moment for some people for a few hours while these core services that are so entrenched in our lives went missing. Every interaction, every like, every search is fed into the algorithms, and they can predict our behaviours. We're essentially trading away our privacy for convenience. But while it's not all bad, it's still important to be careful. As at the heart of it, our data is still intrinsic to us. It says something about us, and it's about us as a person. And we need to be careful who we share it with. Let's take a look at Facebook to start with, which I know is considered to be a bit of an old person's network, according to some of my students, but what can I say? I'm an old person. Facebook has 2 billion active users per month. That's nearly a third of the global population. There are apparently 51 million Facebook users in the UK. That's more than 75% of the population of this country with a Facebook account. And every single day we willingly hand over our data to Facebook. In a typical minute on Facebook, there are 136,000 pictures uploaded, 510,000 comments written, and 293,000 status updates. That's a lot of data, and that's just the stuff we're making a conscious choice to hand over, and we're actively giving it to them. On top of that, there's all the other weird and wonderful ways that we hand over data to companies without even realising it. Think about it. We're prepared to share every facet of our lives with Facebook, with Google, with Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok and so much more. We'll share the births of our children, our weddings, our birthdays, our breakups, our new pets, our new jobs, our new cars. Absolutely everything is shared on the internet now. And it all builds to a rich profile of data about us and the people we know. And if you start to think about how much your data is worth and how much you would charge to give it away to someone, you'd probably estimate that to be quite high. In reality, it's probably not going to be as much as you think, I'm afraid. Things like your birthday or your location aren't really worth that much to people. And people pay less than 1 pence per person for that kind of information. Even things like whether you're pregnant or the type of drugs that you take or things like that aren't worth that much, but they're worth slightly more because it allows slightly more targeted adverts to you. So, for example, if you're pregnant, there's a very different set of adverts that will get sent out to you. If you take a certain type of medication, particularly in the US, you can be targeted with adverts from particular pharmaceutical companies. But even then, we're talking around 10, 20p per person. If you go to the right corner of the internet, you can buy credit card details for around £10. A Facebook user account is worth maybe $100, or you could buy a bank account and details of a bank account with £2,000 balance, and they're sold for around $200, so a tenth of the value of them if you go to some of the darker corners of the internet. The companies like Google's, the Facebooks, the Twitters aren't interested in this raw data. They don't care about the facts and figures, your favourite food, your date of birth. These things in isolation aren't that useful, but when you start to put them together with other things, that's when you really start to become interesting, and that's when the data becomes really, really powerful. Everything that you do online leaves a footprint. Every interaction you make, every time you linger on an advert, every second of a video that you watch, every time you're scrolling through your news feed and stopping on a story or watching a couple of seconds of a video, that all feeds into the algorithms running behind the scenes. And as we've talked about, it doesn't stop there. The people around you and the things they like and the things they search for help to drive the algorithms and build a deeper and richer understanding of you. And not just you as an individual, but you as a demographic, you as an age group, you as a gender, you as a job role or a student. It's all building to a much richer and more targeted picture of you. Now, I should say at this point, it's not that we're constantly being monitored. You're not under constant surveillance. And if anything, we're giving this data to people rather than them actively taking it. But we're also only human. And if nothing else, humans are creatures of habit. For example, most people will wake up in the morning and reach for their phone. They'll check Facebook, they'll check Twitter, they'll check news feeds. They'll get up and they'll go about their day. They'll come home at night before they go to bed. They'll check their phone, they'll check their Facebook, their news feeds, their Twitter, and then they go to sleep. And even with that, simple interactions, you can build up a picture of people's daily lives. All it takes is a little bit of patience and a large enough data set, and then you can predict most behaviours and outcomes with a really, really good level of accuracy. That's how Cambridge Analytica managed to build up such accurate profiles about voters and how they could be influenced. It was all about the sheer number of people they had access to and the volume of data they had about each one. By running questionnaires and things on Facebook, then they built up a very accurate picture of lots of different people and of different political persuasions and worked out how to influence them in the best way. When you have enough data, you can make very accurate and very targeted predictions. And a lot of the time, we're willingly giving that wet data away for free. Sometimes it's really obvious. It might be a poorly constructed text or email, sometimes called smishing and phishing, asking for your bank details in order to save the day, or maybe an order that you forgot you'd done needs you to just click on this link and enter your bank details to have it finally delivered. And people are getting quite good at spotting those now, but in retaliation, the people creating those texts and those emails are getting much better at making them look realistic. And it's a numbers game. It's really easy to send out 1 million texts or 1 million emails, and all you need is 4 or 5 people to respond and pay you the £100, and it's a good day at the office. But even then, other times it's not quite so obvious what the intentions of the people are. Think about how many times you've seen something like this on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or any other social network that I might be too old to understand. And it seems like it's something that might be fun to share with your friends. Who doesn't like Star Wars? But have a closer look at the information that you're being asked to share. Your name, your mother's maiden name, the city you were born in. What do all of those things have in common? Where do we typically see that kind of information being used? If you're thinking security questions or password reset questions, then give yourself a gold star. These kinds of things can be used to get people to share information. So you may post this on Facebook and think it's a bit of fun. Your friends all reply and share it with their friends who all reply, and so on and so on. And then it's quite an easy job to go and harvest people's name along with their mother's maiden name and the city they were born in. And it's this kind of unwittingly giving away our data that's really quite powerful. We don't realise that there's perhaps a darker side to some of the things we share online, and it could be used against us in some way. It doesn't even have to be that obvious. Sometimes just the fact that you will repost something or share it is interesting to less than scrupulous companies. For example, I can tell you that Mark Zuckerberg did not suddenly become very altruistic and want to give away his fortune. It's very, very unlikely to have happened. Knowing that you can be encouraged to reshare things is very interesting and provides yet more data about you. So let's take something like this, and we'll come back to this kind of example later on. Mark Zuckerberg did not give away $4.5 million to 1,000 people. I can say that without a shadow of a doubt. But this gets people to share this content and like this content, and you get a very, very successful Facebook page very quickly with millions and millions of followers. This is worth something, and although it's against Facebook's terms and conditions, it can still happen that once you have a page with 1 million followers on, you can sell it on the black market. And you sell it to someone and they have 1 million followers and a big reach out of nowhere, and then they change the name of the page, they change the content of the page, and you've gone from a competition Facebook page to something pushing a certain political agenda. So these are things that seem very innocuous to start with, and people will tell you it's just a bit of fun, and it can have a really serious connotation. And up to now, we've talked about ways where you're actively giving away your data, where you've been giving something away, but there's more. You can leak data without realising you're even doing it, and that's what I want to talk about now. We've all heard about biometrics, right? We have them on our phones, where you might scan your face or your fingerprint, and your phone says, yeah, I know who you are, off you go. And we use it to pay for things, and we use it to log into our phones, and even to log into our laptops now. Your face and fingerprints, your earlobes, your heart rhythms, all sorts of weird and wonderful things about your body are unique to you. And it's not just your physical attributes that are so unique. The way you interact with technology, the way you behave can be unique to you. They're behaviours that are learned over time. So things like the way that you type, the way you walk, the way you use a mouse are all things that can be used to uniquely identify you as an individual. Typing is a really interesting behaviour to me, and it's something I've done quite a lot of research on, because it's a behaviour that we build up through years and years of experience. Every time you use a keyboard, you're training your body to perform this activity more and more automatically. And if we take a step back from that, our brains work roughly with two systems. System 1, which is the automatic things, it's fast thinking. And System 2, which is the more rational, more evolved side of our brain that thinks things through, and it's slow thinking. So for example, as you learn to drive a car, you're very much using System 2. You have to think about every single decision. You can't talk, you can't think, you can just drive and keep the car moving in a straight line and not running into anything or any pedestrians. But as you practice, as you become more familiar, then different elements of driving start to slip over into System 1. Suddenly, changing gear isn't a huge life-changing ordeal. You don't need to plan it, you don't need to worry about it, you just do it. You don't need to worry about that upcoming left turn because you've already indicated it and you've turned. You don't need to think about it anymore. And then you can start to appreciate the scenery around you or hold a conversation while you're driving because you're freeing up more and more of the System 2 with each practice. And the same is true for typing, that when you type something, you become more familiar with it. Your body becomes more used to that process and it becomes more automatic. And it slowly slips from System 1, fast thinking, to System 2, slow thinking. So let's take an example. If you change your password regularly, which you should, the first time you type it, it feels slow, it feels clunky, it feels unnatural. But the more and more times you type it, it becomes automatic. You don't even need to think about it. Your fingers just do it for you. You don't need to expend any conscious thought thinking what should come next. And that's true for lots of different things that we type. And it's perfectly possible to identify somebody by the way that they type. If you think about the things that you type regularly, lots of things inform what words you type more frequently than others. Your age, your job, your name, where you live, your education, where you work. Everything means you have a slightly different set of words you type more commonly than anyone else. And this drives your typing patterns. In fact, a number of websites actually do this analysis of your typing patterns in the background to confirm that you are who you say you are. It's a nice little bit of added security to make sure the person who's logged in is the person typing. So for example, I log into a website, maybe my bank, and I'm typing away, and my bank is checking the timings in between those key presses to see that it's still Oli logged in and typing away. But it doesn't stop there. We don't just stop with being able to say the person who's logged in is definitely that person. Think about the things that you type more commonly and the things that you type more often than your friends might, or that I might. What data doesn't change and you type a lot? The first thing that comes to mind for me is my name. It's fairly static. I've had it for quite a long time and I type it a lot. It's in my email addresses, it's part of my online shopping accounts, it's part of my usernames for stuff. It's everywhere. And so there are patterns to how I type my name, and they're different to the way that you will type those patterns because they're informed by how often I type it, my handedness, my age, my experience of the keyboard, whether I can touch type. Lots and lots of different things go to make up how I type Oli Buckley. And I've done some research where we've looked at if we can identify people, information about people, just by the way that they type. So for example, we were looking at understanding if we could find out someone's name just by letting them type a paragraph of text, a completely random paragraph of text. And so we break the letters in the typing down into pairs. So here on the left we have OL, AB, CH, IV, OP, ERCZ. That's the text that we've typed in, broken down into two-letter combinations. Next to that we have the timings. So the first occurrence is 54 milliseconds to type those two letters. The second occurrence is 48 milliseconds to type OL. And so on. And we build up this profile of how long it takes to type each of these pairs of letters. We then produce a ranking. The fastest at the top, the slowest at the bottom. And as you can see here, we have ER, IV and OL at the top. They're all the letters that exist in Oliver. So obviously this means the letters that we type more commonly are more automatic, they're quicker, they're smoother, they're more intrinsic to me. And the experiments that we did showed that we could predict more than 70% of the pairs of letters in someone's name just by them typing. We gave them an entirely random paragraph of text. It was the first paragraph from the book The War of the Worlds. Everyone typed the same paragraph. And we were able to predict 70% of the letters in their name just from that typing data, where everybody typed the same thing. But it doesn't stop there. We were able to start to predict what hand you preferred to write with, what age group you might fall into, what your gender might be, even what your native language was. So we could predict the language that someone spoke at birth, or their first language, just by the way they typed, because again, there are common phrases in different languages. For example, French, L-E, L-A, etc. German, D-E. So there's lots of quirks of language that are unique to certain languages. And so just from this really basic set of data, just from typing, we're able to predict a lot about an individual. And this data is really easy to get hold of. It's a simple piece of code on a website to collect keystrokes. Recently there was an article called Self-Censorship on Facebook, and they were talking about the things people choose not to share on Facebook. They took a random sample of 5 million users in the UK and the US, and they found that quite a large percentage start to write something and then decide not to go through with the post. I'm sure we've all done it. We sit there on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, and we start to compose a post complaining about someone or something that's happened to us, and then we stop and we think, and we realise maybe it's not the best thing to post, and we delete it. It's quite cathartic to write that out without ever actually hitting the submit button. But that doesn't mean no one's ever going to see it. It's a really simple piece of code that you can embed in a website using JavaScript, and it checks whether anything has been typed into one of the text boxes. And then it can record the keystrokes if there is anything in there. It's called a keyboard listener, and it's attached to each of the boxes on a form, and it sits there and it waits, and when you press a key or release a key, it logs that, and it logs it somewhere. So we know the key that was pressed and the key that was released and the time that they were pressed. And so you can work out what key was pressed when and in what order, and you can really easily recreate what someone's typed. And this isn't some kind of nefarious trick that hackers have come up with in the secret Facebook dungeons. It's standard JavaScript, and it's been around for years. It makes the internet work in a lot of cases. Now, Facebook say very clearly they do not collect this information, and they don't do it. So there's nothing to worry about there. And but they say a lot of things as well. So I think the message here is, when you type something on the internet, even if you don't hit submit, even if you don't hit save, someone could see it one day. And the best advice would be to not type something on the internet that you wouldn't be comfortable with other people seeing. Think about it. These companies like Facebook, like Twitter, like Google are data driven. They make a living and they make money out of your data. If you starve them of content, of your thoughts, of your musing, then you're damaging their fundamental business model. So be objective, be a little suspicious when you type online. Don't assume that because you've hit delete it will disappear forever. And it's not just typing that can tell someone a lot about you. There are lots of different ways to give away information about who you are and what you like. For example, games are a really interesting way to disclose information about yourself. They have interaction with technology through a keyboard, a phone screen, or a joypad. They have you exhibit behaviours, you exhibit response to stimuli, you exhibit strategies, both long-term and short-term, and these are all quite intrinsic to you as an individual based on your own experiences. I ran an experiment a number of years ago using the game Tetris. And for those of you who don't know, Tetris is a really simple game where you use different shapes to build a wall. We found that the strategies people used in the game were identifiable. The way that people placed these blocks was unique to them, and we could find out who was playing the game based on the way they were playing. And that's because there's lots of things that go to make up your strategies in Tetris, whether it's how long you've been playing, the kind of personality you are, how familiar you are with the controls on the keyboard, your overall aim. Are you trying to build up a big row of shapes, or are you trying to get single lines at a time? Your long-term and your short-term strategies. So it's solely looking at the way people played the game, how they played it, we were able to identify them. And it's not just the way you interact with technology that can give away your personal data or put your privacy at risk. Even something as simple as playing an online game can reveal more about yourself than you might think possible. aside from the fact that you aren't very good at the game, if you're me, I've never touched Fortnite because I feel like I've missed that boat and I'm slightly too old for it. So we'll stick to something a little more my speed. On screen is a picture of the characters from a game called Overwatch, which I think might be slightly dated now, but it's still quite widely played online and has a big following. And for those of you that haven't seen it, it's an online shooter where you need to work together as a team to achieve certain objectives. The balance of the team is absolutely paramount in being successful in Overwatch. The game has a healthy roster of characters, and your choice of character make or break that team. We have characters who can heal, who can attack, who can defend, who can help capture the objectives. It's really, really, I can't emphasize enough, it's really about the balance of the team if you're going to win. I was involved in a study where we analysed the character choice of individuals and what that told us about the person playing, with some really, really interesting results. We found that the choice of character and how people chose those characters revealed a lot about the person sat behind the keyboard, the person actually playing the game. So, for example, players who were high in conscientiousness and agreeableness, so those who worked hard and those who were more amenable, result in more balanced teams. The characters that were chosen were dictated by gender, agreeableness, and extroversion. We found that male players were likely to choose male or female characters, where female players were more likely to focus on playing as a female character. We found that the type of gamer that someone was, whether they liked to explore or socialise with friends or kill people, go to get kills or to achieve the objectives and get points, that was defined by their agreeableness and their gender. We found that a player's choice of character was highly related to gender and agreeableness and extroversion. And we found lots and lots of ways to look at this data, and it's really, really interesting. Something as simple as choosing a character in an online game can reveal a lot about you as a person. There are lots of weird and wonderful ways to lose data. It doesn't have to be losing a USB stick or having your data stolen in a breach, or being subject to a phishing attack, or being hacked, or ransomware, or anything like that. Everything that you do online leaves traces and gives clues about who you are as a person. And the truth is, it's a balancing act. There's no one-size-fits-all to protect your privacy online. It's going to be a trade-off between using technology and maintaining your privacy. So much of our world and the way we communicate, particularly post-pandemic, is based on interacting on the internet and online. That's something we can't really get away from. And there are huge benefits to the internet. They bring communities closer together. They allow us to communicate with friends and family that we otherwise wouldn't be able to see. It provides access to services for lots of communities that would struggle to access them. And so we have to make decisions each time we use it, how we balance our own privacy and what we need to do with the technology. It's balancing usability and security, or usability and privacy. The most secure system in the world is one that's not connected to the internet, is never used by humans. But sadly, we don't live in a Skynet world. That's just not workable. So much of our lives is online now, and so we have to make that call between privacy and if we engage with the world. So I want to finish off by talking about some of the ways you can be a bit more savvy and protect yourself online without cutting all ties to the internet and living in a bunker. First of all, understand what you're getting into. Be clever, take ownership, and understand what happens to your data. It's your data after all, and it's about you. It's tough, but you might actually have to start reading things like the terms and conditions. Be savvy about your data, about who you're giving it to, how it might be used, and what they do with it at the end. There are websites, thankfully, like Terms of Service Didn't Read, that distill the terms and conditions down for you to be something short, sharp, and manageable, so you know exactly what you're giving out and why. So start to think about what happens when you click I agree. Think what they might do with your data. Think what that could end up with. There are plenty of apps out there that take things like our face, our personal data, our biometrics, and use them for some nefarious purpose or some other purpose than we might think, and we just click I agree because it's simpler. So start to think and question things. Don't accept the status quo. We don't have to accept default settings, for example. Humans are really bad at something when it requires effort. That's why so many devices get hacked. It's a numbers game. It's not because the hackers are geniuses with unrivaled skills. It's often because people don't want to go to the effort of changing the default settings on their device. So, for example, if you buy a router or a camera that connects to the internet and you don't change the default password, then that's an easy target for a hacker. They would much rather go after people with default settings that they know in advance and it's very little effort for them than go to a lot of effort to try and hack someone who's secure. Let's be honest, how many of us have actively checked and changed the privacy settings on a Facebook account? It's fine, you can admit it, it's a safe space, you're not alone. Companies don't pick user default settings at random. They know that people won't go out of their way to change them, and so if something is set as default, there's usually a reason for it. For example, when you sign up for a service, they will vary between ticking the box to opt in and to opt out of being sent marketing emails. That's not by chance. They're hoping that people will be too lazy to read it properly and either check or uncheck the box accordingly. And it's tough, but one of the best ways to protect yourself online is to become interested in your own privacy and security. It is your data. It's about you. And so you need to become actively involved in keeping it safe. But sadly, this means it's not just something you can do once and then you'll be set for life. You need to keep on top of this. There'll always be new apps that want to connect to your accounts. There'll be new services. There'll be new things that you want to sign up for. And effectively, I'm setting you a lifetime of homework. But it's worth it. This is about you. Online, the data that's held online is you. And it can be there for a long time, as we'll talk about in a minute. Another key thing is to be skeptical. If something seems too good to be true, then it probably is. On any given day, you will see something shared like this on Facebook or on Twitter or on Instagram. A friend has liked or shared a post saying that a holiday has been unclaimed because Virgin Atlantic couldn't possibly give them all away. And so rather than waste money, Virgin are being truly altruistic and giving it away for free. Here's the thing. These are just designed to get as much attention as possible. It's not just holiday giveaways, but things like, I bet this post won't get 1 million likes. It's about getting as many likes and engagements with people as possible so they can sell the page on. As we previously discussed, this is something that's not allowed on Facebook but can still happen. You can easily sell a page with lots and lots of likes and members for a huge sum of money, and then you change the content, you change what it's about, and then you have 1 million people liking your page about whatever you like. You can push anything out to them. Why do people buy pages like this with millions and millions of likes? They know that these people are susceptible to scams. They know they can start hitting them with adverts and promotions and maybe start to upgrade to small levels of fraud, getting them to pay for something that doesn't exist. And it's all really important that you be skeptical and you don't take everything on the internet at face value. I can't stress enough, if it sounds too good to be true, then it probably is. And I think the key thing is to think about what you share online. There's a film called The Social Network, which is about the rise of Facebook. It makes starting a tech company look incredibly exciting and sexy, and I'm sure the reality of that is perhaps not true. There's a lot of hard work, a lot of sleepless nights, and a lot of time sat in front of a computer. But this line really stuck with me, and I think it's a good way to finish. The internet isn't written in pencil, it's written in ink. Think about the information that you put online because it's going to be there for a long time. It's really hard to get something removed from the internet. If you share information, think about the long-term connotations of sharing it. Will it crop up at a job interview in 5 years' time? Will it show up when your children go to school? Will it come back to bite you at some point? And this has become really fascinating to me since I've become a parent, and it's the connotations of my children growing up with the internet all around them. That the internet being a default part of their life. I've tried to be fairly restrained in putting them online and letting them access online services. I've got a separate social media account on Instagram, which is incredibly locked down and is only there so remote family and friends can keep up to date with the children. But I do my best to keep my children off the internet because I don't want to make that choice for them. I don't want to decide that this is the presence they're putting out there to the world when they're too young to have an opinion on that. And the things that we use and we say on the internet will stay around for a long time. Maybe even this talk will be around in 10 years' time. And that's something worth thinking about. Thank you for listening today. I hope you've enjoyed it.